So our lifting program, once you pass the initial base phases across all the sports I work with, follows the same basic format. We live 4 days a week in the off season, 3 days a week, or 2 to 3 days a week on the in season. We have a Olympic lift every day, an Olympic or a power lift every day. So we've got power / Olympic. We have a squat lift. We have a press. We have a pull. And then we will have a posterior chain or upper body prehab. Prehab essentially means, you have rehab after you've had an injury. Prehab is injury prevention. So that'll be scapula stabilization, shoulder strengthening, hip strengthening, knee stabilization. Any of those kind of things are prehab work. So if we've got dumbbells and we're doing YTWs, that's strengthening our shoulder to prevent against dislocation or a serious shoulder injury, torn rotator cuffs, torn labrums, those kind of things. So we have posterior chain. Posterior chain is essentially anything along the back half of your body. The back half of your body is the posterior chain. So it's working on our glutes, working on our hamstrings, lower back stuff. That's all kind of what we hit with the posterior chain work. And we alternate days with, one day is posterior chain, next day is upper prehab, and then posterior chain, upper prehab for a 4-day. If we're going a 3-day, we'll typically alternate for during phases. So we'll do a whole phase where we've got 2 days a week posterior chain, 1 day a week upper prehab. The next phase we'll flip it and we'll go 2 upper prehab, 1 posterior chain. So we've got our power Olympic squat, press, pull, posterior chain, upper prehab. Then I also throw in there what is called spring ankle, which is working on strengthening our feet, the arches of our feet. We find in the shoes that we wear nowadays, shoes, sandals, stuff like that, we're losing the strength in our feet that we naturally should have. And our feet are our base for everything. So if you have weak feet, you're gonna have weak squat form, you're gonna have weak running form. So, and then you're prone to injury, basically, if you have weak feet. So we're working on strengthening our feet, which in turn strengthens our ankles, strengthens our knees, our hips, our lower back, our shoulders. Everything all the way up from our feet is strengthened by us strengthening our feet. So we've got our spring ankle, and then after that we will do a core session or loaded carries, such as farmers walks, suitcase walks with a single dumbbell, front rack carries where you've got a dumbbell in each hand and you're holding it like you would a bar in a front squat position, and we're just basically walking with weight to work on our core stabilization. So that's kind of the basic format that we follow once we get out of the initial base phases. In the initial base phases, we tend to focus in a little bit more on the power aspect. So we work a lot of jumping and hopping mechanics, because when you get to the Olympic lifts, basically all you're doing is jumping with weight. So we focus on our mechanics of how do we jump and how do we land with our initial power series through our base phase. We focus on the fundamentals of squat, press, and pull. We tend to focus a little bit more on posterior chain in the base phases because we find that through our posture and through how we were sitting in desks all day or we're standing all day, our posterior chain is weaker than most of the rest of our body. So we kind of hone in on posterior chain in the base phases and really kind of give a jump start to strengthening that posterior chain. And then we do, some basic core and loaded carry stuff. The kind of idea behind our base phase is that we are working on flexibility, stability, and work capacity. Without those three things, you can't advance safely in the weight room. If my knees aren't flexible, my hips aren't flexible, if I don't have good stability, if I don't have good mobility, I'm not going to be able to safely, with weight on my back, get all the way down into a squat and come back up with that weight. You're going to put yourself at serious risk for injury. The other thing is work capacity, which is essentially what we're working with our initial loaded carries. We're working on our ability to move with weight and to handle the stress on the body that we are going to eventually be emphasizing in our later phases. So essentially that's what we do in our base phase. So as an example, I'll write out here what we have for our day one base phase. So we're going to have jump mechanics, we're going to have bodyweight squat, we'll have supine row, we have push-ups with hands elevated. We start out with the hands elevated because most people can't do a proper push-up, or at least not what we believe to be a proper push-up. Most people, when they do a push-up, their elbows come out to the sides and they don't quite get all the way down. So we start with the hands elevated so you can start to work running your elbows along your rib cage and getting all the way down and back up. And we'll go over that a little bit later. Here's our posterior chain. We are working floor back extensions. So we're working lower back with that one. And then we go into our first phase of spring ankle. And then our first phase of loaded carry. So here's your power, here's your squat, here is your pull, here's your press, here is your posterior chain, and then your spring ankle and your loaded carry. So there we are following essentially the same template as we do in the later phases when we start actually moving weight. Day two, we are going to emphasize a little bit more on some of our stability stuff. So there's going to be more of our upper prehab and posterior chain than there will be our squat, pull, and press. So we're gonna kind of take some of those out, and we're gonna add in some more of the upper prehab and posterior chain. So that's about it. That's about how our phases work and how our days kind of work. Typically in the weight room, what we'll do is, for time's sake, especially if you're trying to get in and out in 25, 30 minutes, ideally I like to, in the off season, have 45 minutes to get in and get out. That allows us, especially with some of our linemen, to move heavier weights and have better rest periods in between. But in season, where we're moving less weight, and we're trying to go at more of a game tempo, we'll typically superset stuff. So I'll tell them that, okay, you superset your loaded carry with your posterior chain or upper prehab, which means I do a set of this, then I do a set of this, and then I come immediately back and do a set of this. So you're just bouncing back and forth doing sets, and you knock out 2 lifts in the time it takes you to do 1. And then we'll superset our spring ankle with our press, our pull, or our squat, depending on which one is our secondary lift of the day. And that's the other thing is, we start out with our Olympic lift or our power lift. That's our number 1 on our sheet, which means we want to get that one done first. That one is going to prime our neurosystem and get our CNS fired up and ready to lift. After that, we go to our primary strength exercise, which is going to be the second one. That's our primary. That's where we're focusing on the day. So Monday, for example, squat is our primary lift. Tuesday, deadlift is our primary lift. Thursday, our primary lift is our bench press. And then on Friday, our primary lift is another pull, but we focus more on pull-ups, chin-ups, and stuff like that for our primary on that day. That's where you want to expel the most amount of energy. So you don't want to start at the bottom and work your way up, because then when you get to your primary lift, where you want to have the most amount of energy, you don't have any energy left. So we start with that one as our primary. We do essentially a warm-up here. Then we go into our primary lift. Then we do our tertiary lift, or our third level lift. It's second to the primary, but it's our third, because we want to allow ourselves a little bit of time here to maybe recover a little bit, catch our breath again while we're still getting a lift in. Then we move on to our secondary lift, and then these are kind of our accessories for the day. So again, to recap, you want to be using the majority of your energy on your primary lift. Then you get a slight recovery period with a little bit of a scaled back. A lot of times it's a body weight lift that we do of a tertiary lift. And then again, we're hitting it hard with our secondary lift. And then we go into our accessories, posterior chain, spring ankle, and loaded carry.